This is the third Inspired bike that I've ever unboxed, and I would say third time's a charm, but truthfully, every time's been a charm. Every single bike I've ridden with Inspired has been pretty spot on, and I've called the gold standard. So it stands to reason that this bike probably won't be much different. But I'm really curious because I've never ridden a steel Inspired frame. One other thing that I'm really excited about when it comes to this bike is that Inspired hooked me up with all kinds of information. They emailed over all these extra facts and tidbits about the bike. For example, did you know that in 2012, when Allie Clarkson was helping develop this bike, he lived in a town called Blackpool, and in Blackpool apparently there's lots of arcades, hence the name Arcade. I'm gonna try to pepper in as much of these little details throughout the unboxing video so that we learn a little bit more about the bike and the backstory behind it. This is my favorite part. Okay, let's see what we got here. Inspired brand wheels with Maxxis Holy Roller 24 by 2.4 tires. Standard, but exactly what you need. Got some Inspired pedals, bunch of other bits and pieces. Inspired Pro handlebar. Now for the fun part. Ooh, bright orange. You're not gonna miss this one. Ooh, I like, this is like a matte color too. I expected it to be shiny. It's like a matte day glow orange. Wow, wow. Wait till you see the close-up of this bike. What's in the box? Magura MT7s. Post mount brake adapters for the frame, KMC chain, super burly, front axle, and some chain tensioners. And the most important element of all, the bell. Wow, this is really crazy in person. This is like a matte finish. Even though it looks so bright, the matte finish really gives it a cool feel. And it almost feels like I'm holding a BMX frame, just the way that it's built and the thickness of the tubes and everything. This is gonna be a lot different than the foreplay, but I'm really excited to see how this rides. I wanna spend a little time with this frame because this frame has had a huge impact on street trials worldwide. They developed it back in 2012, so this geometry, this style of bike has been around for over 10 years. And the way that they developed it and the impact that it's had not only on other brands and other riders, but even on their own existing line, can't be overstated. As an example, the head angle on this bike is 74.5 degrees, which at the time that this bike was created was a full degree steeper than every other bike on the market. Fast forward 10 years later and almost all of the bikes we're testing in the Steel Bike Showdown have the same head angle. Have a look at the rear triangle of this bike and you can see how compact it is. And the bottom bracket is plus 25, which is the highest of the 3 bikes that we're going to be testing in the Showdown. To put all of this into context, Inspired said that they thought about the design of this bike similar to how fighter jets are designed. A fighter jet has a level of instability in its design, which translates into agility in the air. And very much like this, where you have the steep head angle, the high bottom bracket, the compact rear triangle, this bike, once you adjust to it, becomes very agile and allows you to do things that some other bikes couldn't. Something that really stands out when you look at this bike is how far they've gone with this minimalistic approach. Ways that they've integrated certain things like the seat tube here or the head tube. Looking at the horizontal dropouts here and how tiny they actually are. It's just enough to get the job done properly, but there's no wasted anything when it comes to the build of this bike. As I've been talking through this bike, I'm sure you've noticed these BMX cranks that come with it. These have got to be some of the strongest trials cranks you can get your hands on. Now seems like a perfect time to talk through the rest of the components and get this bike built up. Oh yeah, one other thing I want to mention. We're in the middle of a Steel Bike Showdown where I'm unboxing, testing, and riding 3 Steel Street Trials bikes, and this is one of the 3 that we're testing. A big thank you to Trials Superstore for sending us all 3 of the bikes. If you want to pick up any of these bikes, that's the place to go get them. Let's get this bike build rolling. Now when it comes to Inspired, there are usually 2 versions of every bike that they offer. There's the Pro version and there's the Team version. The Team version is like best parts, best everything, and the Pro model is usually a little bit more affordable. And you can see that in the wheel set where they have a free wheel that just threads onto a hub here on the Pro model, and on the Team model you usually have a proper free hub like a Hope hub or whatever else. There's not a huge difference here in the way that it feels necessarily,
But this is a way that Inspired can save a little bit and pass it on to you so that you can get your hands on one of these bikes a little bit cheaper if you don't want to go full blast with the team model. Actually, this is really impressive, just showing how the chain tensioner is almost part of the Dropout itself. The refinements that they've made over the past decade with this bike are really shown up in things like this. We've talked about the difference between the team and the pro spec when it comes to Inspired bicycles, and one area where that really shows up is the handlebar that comes with the bike. The Pro spec comes with a 50mm rise bar, while the Team spec comes with an 80mm rise bar. So because I'm testing this bike and I'm going to be comparing it to a few other bikes, both of which have higher rise bars on them, I'm going to make one small change, and that's to put one of my 80mm handlebars on the bike. I happen to have a Deity high side bar in 80mm in a color that matches this bike. I actually bought this full price. It's not like a deal with Deity or anything. This is the bar though that I use on every single trials bike that I ride. And the thing about it is that this is actually the same shape as an arcade 80mm rise bar from Inspired. So I'm basically putting the same shape handlebar that would come on the team version of this bike. I want to make sure that we feel this bike to its truest level, and that's why I'm making that one change. Oh yeah, while I was matching these Deity bars to the color of the bike, I also managed to find some Deity grips that matched the bike, and they also had a set of pedals, but I thought maybe that was a little bit too far, so I'm just sticking with these two for now. Here's a quick look at the pedals that come on this bike. These are the Inspired Pro pedals. All we really have left to do now is build out this drivetrain and we can take it out for a quick ride. I've got a spot in mind. I feel like an Inspired I should be doing an obligatory manual somewhere, and I've got just the bunny hop manual that I want to go hit. I wasn't joking. This bike is all dialed in. They've refined everything. Even without the chain tensioner, this is where the chain comes in. I've got to make a little adjustment here, but this bike is pretty much ready to rip. I almost forgot about the most important part of any bike build, and that's to make sure the bolts are actually tight. So I'm busting out my torque wrench. I'm gonna run through this bike real quick and make sure everything is tightened to spec so we don't have any surprises on that first ride. The one thing I've learned from this torque wrench over the few bike builds that I've used it for is that I'm not even remotely close to tightening my bolts as tight as they need to be. No wonder I've had so many surprises on first rides. This thing is a lifesaver for real. There we go. Much better. Okay, last thing we're gonna do before we get outside is weigh the bike. Then it's go time. Just for reference, this is what the 4Play Pro weighs. As promised, we're at one of my favorite ledges for manualing. It's pretty close to the shred spot, and it's actually one of the first places I brought my Inspired 4Play when I built it up. So it feels right that we should bring the Inspired Arcade to the same spot. Let's hit it. Woo! Well, that worked out okay. This thing locks in on manuals. I felt like as soon as I got to that balance point, it just held there, and I felt super confident and comfortable in that spot. This bike so far, after one little manual session, it's given me a really good feel, and I think part of it might be that Allie Clarkson, who had a big hand in designing this bike, has a really similar riding background to me, so I feel like there's gonna be a lot of stuff that I really appreciate about this bike on a level that maybe more than some of the other bikes that have been designed on more of a street or BMX influence. So I'm anxious to see how this continues to ride. I can't wait to spend some more time with it, but we're off to a good start. So if you're new to street trials, I made you a playlist right here that you can go to and get started, start learning some of the new skills that you're gonna wanna have when you ride a bike like this. And if you're here for the Steel Showdown to see all the unboxings and first rides and the complete showdown between the bikes, the playlist is right here.